Howard Hughes was born in 1905 into extraordinary wealth. His father had already changed the oil industry with a revolutionary drilling bit, turning a single invention into a fortune. When Hughes inherited the company at a young age, he did not inherit struggle. He inherited power. From early childhood, Hughes was distant. He was not social, not expressive, and not interested in people. Instead, he focused on systems, machines, and control. He trusted precision more than emotion, order more than conversation. Money gave him complete freedom and complete isolation. Unlike other heirs, Hughes did not simply manage his wealth. He immersed himself in the details. He questioned engineers, rewrote plans, and demanded perfection. He believed that if something failed, it was because control had been lost. This belief followed him everywhere. In his 20s, Hughes turned his attention to aviation. At the time, flying was still dangerous, unpredictable, and often deadly. Most wealthy investors stayed far from the cockpit. Hughes refused. He believed distance weakened authority. If a machine was to be trusted, he had to sit inside it. Aviation became an obsession. He poured money into experimental aircraft, pushing engineers to design faster, lighter, and more advanced machines. Hughes personally tested them. He chased records, believing speed was proof of mastery, and mastery was proof of worth. He broke transcontinental flight records. He shattered airspeed limits. He turned aviation into a personal challenge. But Hughes never accepted limits quietly. In 1946, during a test flight of an experimental reconnaissance aircraft, everything collapsed. The plane malfunctioned and crashed violently into a residential area. Hughes survived, but his body was devastated. Broken ribs, crushed chest, burns, nerve damage, injuries that never fully healed. From that moment on, pain became permanent. Doctors prescribed powerful painkillers to manage his injuries. At first, the medication allowed him to continue working, but over time, the dependence grew. Pain was no longer something to escape, it became something to manage endlessly. At the same time, Hughes's fear of contamination intensified. Germs, dust, fingerprints, everything became a threat. He demanded extreme cleanliness, rewrote instructions repeatedly, and enforced rigid routines. Human contact began to feel dangerous. Still, publicly, Hughes remained powerful. He expanded into Hollywood, acquiring studios and shaping the film industry from behind closed doors. He controlled actors' contracts, influenced productions, and quietly manipulated careers. He rarely appeared in public, believing visibility weakened authority. By his mid-30s, Hughes had achieved extraordinary influence. He was a technological pioneer, a billionaire, and a silent power broker. But the structure holding his life together was fragile. He slept irregularly. He isolated himself for long periods. He became increasingly distrustful of everyone around him. The traits that built his empire, obsession, control, precision, were no longer tools. They were turning inward. Howard Hughes was still one of the most powerful men in America, but he was already withdrawing from the world. And once he disappeared, control would be the only thing he had left. By the late 1940s, Howard Hughes had already begun to vanish from public life. The injuries he suffered in his aircraft crashes never healed properly. The pain was constant, sharp, and exhausting. What began as medical treatment slowly became dependence. Powerful painkillers were no longer a solution, they were a requirement. Pain shaped his days, fear shaped his nights. As his physical condition worsened, Hughes's fear of contamination intensified. Germs, dust, fingerprints, even human breath became perceived threats. He believed the outside world was hostile and unclean. Ordinary objects were dangerous. People were unpredictable. Hughes responded the only way he knew how, by tightening control. He issued long, detailed written instructions dictating how others were allowed to interact with him, how objects were to be handled, how rooms were to be prepared, how food was to be served. These instructions were rewritten repeatedly, refined endlessly, as if perfection could eliminate risk. Human contact became minimal. Eventually, it became almost non existent. Hughes retreated into hotel rooms, sealing himself off from the world. Curtains remained closed, lights stayed dim. Entire floors were cleared so that no one could approach him unexpectedly. He communicated through notes, phone calls, and intermediaries who rarely saw him directly. Silence became routine. Despite his isolation, Hughes never abandoned power. He continued to control companies, assets, and political relationships without appearing in public. Decisions were delivered through trusted messengers. Executives followed his instructions without question. No one challenged him. No one wanted to. Authority no longer required presence. As the years passed, Hughes's routines grew increasingly rigid. He slept during the day and stayed awake through the night. Time lost structure. Meals were skipped. Hygiene became irregular. His physical appearance deteriorated rapidly. He watched the same films repeatedly, sometimes for days at a time. Scenes were replayed again and again, as if repetition could impose order on a chaotic world. He rewrote memos obsessively, searching for absolute precision in language and instruction. Control was no longer a tool, it was a necessity. Hughes's health declined steadily. Malnutrition weakened his body. Untreated infections spread. Long-term drug use took its toll. He became frail, emaciated, barely recognizable as the man who once pushed aircraft to their limits. Yet outside his sealed rooms, the myth grew. Howard Hughes was described as a brilliant recluse, a misunderstood genius, a man above society. Few understood the reality. Those closest to him saw a man imprisoned by fear, trapped by his own systems, unable to escape the structures he had built to protect himself. In his final years, Hughes became increasingly paranoid. He moved constantly between hotels and private locations, avoiding attention and scrutiny. Trust disappeared entirely. Only a small circle of intermediaries remained, managing his affairs while shielding him from the world. Isolation was complete. When Howard Hughes died in 1976, there was no dramatic ending, no public farewell, no final statement. His death was quiet, confusing, and surrounded by uncertainty. What followed was chaos. Competing wills appeared, lawsuits erupted, fortunes were contested. For years, courts attempted to untangle a legacy built on secrecy and control. The empire survived, but it fractured. In the end, Howard Hughes left behind immense wealth and unprecedented influence. But he left the world as he had lived his final decades, isolated, unheard, and unseen. His story is not one of simple failure. It is a warning about the cost of absolute control, about the dangers of trusting systems more than people, about the isolation that can come from power without limits. Howard Hughes conquered industries, technology, and speed, but in the end, he could not escape himself.